What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 31 of the Downtown Browntown podcast. I'm your host, Downtown Brown. Today, we're going to preview the Bucks' second round matchup of the playoffs against the almighty super team in the Brooklyn Nets. Game one will be Saturday night at 6:30. Boy, is it going to be a good one. Cannot wait to see how the Bucks come out and, see how that starting lineup looks and just all of the things that we're about to get into right now. Before we get started here, again, just want to make sure to remind you to pre-subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. That way you can stay up to date on all of my featured content as it is posted. And make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well. Twitter, I'm at downtown_Brown, and Instagram, downtown_Brown33, all lowercase there. So let's go ahead and get started. So obviously we know that the Brooklyn Nets are a super team, and they've got the best big three in the league, that being Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant. I mean, you're talking three of the best 12 players in the league, most likely top 15 for sure. I'm not going to go down a list here, but I mean, having three of those caliber players on one team is just insane. So clearly the Bucks are going to have a handful in terms of stopping this Brooklyn Nets team. But we'll go ahead and get into kind of the matchup breakdowns and what we need to see from a rotation perspective and what to expect from the starters and the key role players on this Bucks team to be able to come up with a win against the Brooklyn Nets in this series. So obviously the Bucks are the 3 seed and the Nets are the 2 seed. So we will open up games 1 and 2 in Brooklyn. We just have the schedule for game 1, which is Saturday night, 6:30 p.m. Central Time on TNT. Game 2 will either be Monday or Tuesday. And then we'll see what happens when game 3 or 4 are scheduled for in terms of when those are going to be in Milwaukee. Another keynote, again, that the Bucks will be at full capacity for the rest of the playoffs. So hopefully they can sell out all the tickets and get that place rocking. I went to both games against the Miami Heat, and it was only 50% capacity at the time, but there were definitely seats that were not sold, not occupied. You saw those shirts on the seats. So that was obviously a little disappointing. So I really hope that the Bucks are able to sell a lot of tickets and get that true home court advantage for games 3 and 4. So let's get into it right away. So we're going to start with the starting lineups for the Bucks and what I think I would like to see and what I think I will see in terms of a starting lineup for the Milwaukee Bucks. Obviously, with the loss of Donte DiVincenzo, the Bucks are forced to mix up their starting lineup, which they've pretty much had the whole entire year. So for me, I would love to see PJ Tucker in that starting lineup in place of Donte. I know that doesn't really make sense from like a size perspective. PJ Tucker's really not a 2 guard, which Donte is. But, for me, defensively, it just makes the most sense. If you've got PJ Tucker in the game there, I've changed my ways in terms of who I want guarding the big three. So let's say PJ Tucker starts. This is what I think we would match up with the Nets big three. We're going to have Giannis on Kevin Durant, Jrue Holiday on Kyrie Irving, and PJ Tucker on James Harden. Now, all year I've been saying that if we play this Nets team in the playoffs, I want Jrue on James Harden because I think he's really great at the point of attack on defense. And James Harden is their point guard who runs the offense. So I've always said Jrue Holiday and James Harden. I wanted Donte and Kyrie just because Donte, he can get his workout in and chase Kyrie around. We all know Kyrie has the best handles in the league, second best at worst. And pretty much he's going to cook anyone with his ball handling skills. But, Donte could hold his own and at least be somewhat competent in that matchup. And then I wanted PJ Tucker on Kevin Durant, which is also what we saw when the Bucks had that 2-game mini series against the Brooklyn Nets towards the end of April. So that's what I've always wanted all year. And then to elaborate on that, then that way Giannis would be not guarding one of those big three, and he'd be kind of floating off the ball, which we all saw that Giannis's on-ball defense is elite and worthy of Defensive Player of the Year that he received last year when he locked up Jimmy Butler in that series against the Miami Heat. Jimmy Butler only scoring 58 points in the series, Bryn Forbes 60 points. I mean, that's absolutely unreal. I mean, Giannis really, really did a great job on Jimmy Butler on the ball, and that was really one of the X factors of that series for me. Coach Bud outcoached Eric Spoelstra, which I never would have. There's no way I thought that would have happened coming into that series, but hats off to Bud. But anyways, getting back to the series against the Nets. So that's what I've wanted all year from a defensive perspective against the big three. But now that Dante's out, I think we got to switch things up a little bit. So you know what? Get Giannis in there. He's got to guard Kevin Durant at this point. He's clearly the best matchup for him from a size perspective, and he can give him some fits with his length and his strength. So I think Giannis is definitely makes the most sense on Kevin Durant, and then having Drew on Kyrie Irving, just because Drew is a great defender and he's really good at keeping guys in front of him. And I don't think that Kyrie's his handles are insane, but I think Drew's going to be able to hold his own on Kyrie and really neutralize him in that series. Now, Kyrie's still going to get his. We all know that, but being able to shut him down, at least semi-shutting him down, could be the difference between the Bucks winning and losing the series. So I think Drew Holiday on Kyrie Irving makes the most sense. And then you put PJ Tucker on James Harden. PJ Tucker is a great defender. You know, Harden, I don't think he's the fastest in the world. He's quick when he drives, but PJ's a really strong guy, and he played with Harden multiple years on the Houston Rockets. So clearly he knows his tendencies on the offensive end and how he likes to get to the lane and draw contact, which is what one of the best things about James Harden's game is drawing free throws and getting to the line, which he knocks them down at will. So I really think PJ Tucker in that matchup would do a great job on James Harden. And that's how I'm thinking we should guard the big three. And then with that, then we could have Chris Middleton chasing around Joe Harris, which he just did in the last series against Duncan Robinson and did a phenomenal job at it. So I think Chris Middleton fits that role really well of chasing Joe Harris around, because you can't leave that guy open. He was the number one 3-point shooter in the league this season from a percentage perspective. So can't leave Joe Harris open, which makes the Nets just even more lethal on offense, having 3 of the best 12 players in the league. And then on top of that, the best 3-point shooter in the league. That's just insane. So Middleton on Joe Harris, and then you throw Brook Lopez on Blake Griffin. Now, it's going to be tough for the Bucks it's going to be really key for the Bucks to see how they utilize Brook Lopez in this series. That's one of my keys coming into the series. Now, I was worried against the Miami Heat because we were probably going to play our drop coverage defense against the Heat, which we did. And we all saw that defense get exposed 2 playoff runs in a row. So I was really concerned that the Miami Heat were going to take advantage of that. But again, hats off to Coach Bud for making adjustments and still running that drop coverage, but having a help defender leak onto the Duncan Robinsons of the world, the Goran Dragic's of the world, to make sure they're not getting a wide open 3 when Bam Adebayo, who was guarded by Brook Lopez, would set a screen on one of those 2 players. And oftentimes, as we've seen in years past, that leading to a wide open 3-pointer. And ultimately the Bucks' demise, 2 playoff runs in a row. So again, hats off to Coach Bud for making that adjustment and bringing a help defender to help that pick and roll that they were running on Brook, or from Bam, who was guarded by Brook Lopez. So again, that's going to be key in this Nets series, because it's going to be harder to execute that game plan that the Bucks implemented against the Miami Heat, because who are you going to help off of? You can't help off of Joe Harris. I mean, if Chris Middleton comes to help on that high screen and roll, that's going to be set by Blake Griffin this time rather than Bam Adebayo on any of the big 3 of the Nets. You can't have Middleton help, because if Joe Harris is open, you got to just accept the fact that he's going to make that 3 pretty much every time. So it's going to be really hard for the Bucks to use that same defensive scheme from a drop coverage perspective that they used against the Miami Heat. So I am really, really curious to see how Brook Lopez is utilized in this series. Now, this is all under the assumption as well that Blake Griffin is starting for them. I don't think it really matters either way. Like even if they start DeAndre Jordan over Blake Griffin, which I don't think they will do, they'll still do that same exact thing. But again, Bud's going to have to get really creative with running this drop coverage defense because the Nets have shooters on shooters, and they're going to take advantage of it. I mean, even against the Miami Heat, there were times where, we would still run the drop coverage and the help defender wouldn't be there. And the Heat just don't have nearly the level of shooters that the Brooklyn Nets have. So once in a while, giving up an open three to some of these guys, we could live with that, and they would miss that shot. Trevor Arizas of the world and Kendrick Nunn, who, had a decent series, but still not a lockdown shooter. Iguodala and guys like that. Jimmy Butler, even not a good 3-point shooter. It's really just Duncan Robinson, Goran Dragic, and Tyler Hero was very ineffective as well. So again, the Nets just have so many shooters, even coming off the bench with Landry Shamet, who can knock them down. I mean, Tyler Johnson's a decent shooter. They've just got shooters all up and down that roster. So I'm really curious to see how Brook Lopez is used in the series. Now, I think he can be utilized extremely well on the offensive end because if the Nets start Blake Griffin at the 5, how the hell are they going to defend Brook Lopez in the paint? They're not. I mean, there's no way. Is Kevin Durant going to get on him? He's just going to get bullied. Brook Lopez is so much bigger and stronger than Kevin Durant. He's going to be able to feast in the paint along with Giannis. So maybe some of that defense, lack of defense that Brook will be providing in terms of that drop coverage will offset itself on the offensive end with Brook being utilized in the post. So just keep in mind throughout the series, keep an eye on how Coach Bud uses Brook Lopez. I think that is absolutely key. Now, a thing to me that would make sense would be, you stagger Brook's minutes a little bit and get him in those lineups where, the Brooklyn Nets have more of their bench guys in. Maybe they've got a guy like a Bruce Brown in there, or even like Tyler Johnson isn't a great shooter. He can hit him, but he's not a great shooter. Like if they've got one or two of those guys in there, that's when you want Brook Lopez to be in there. Then we could help off of a guy like a Bruce Brown on that drop coverage defense, and it would work a lot better than helping off of Joe Harris. So, again, I think that how we use Brook Lopez could really, really make or break this series. I think he should be getting minutes. He should be starting, but I think his minutes might need to be reduced a little bit. He was around the low 30s per game against the Heat. But I think he might have to be, mid to upper 20s in this series if he's really getting exposed on the defensive end. So Coach Bud did a great job making adjustments against the Miami Heat. I think he did an excellent job and clearly outcoached Eric Spoelstra, which is just crazy to even say that. But again, really keep an eye on how Brook Lopez is using the series. I think it could really be a tipping point. So again, that's what I want from a starting 5. PJ Tucker in there replacing Dante, but I really, really don't think they're going to do that. To me, it's probably going to be Pat Connaughton or Bryn Forbes. I would not be surprised if Pat starts game 1, like we saw him start game 4 against the Miami Heat. Now, he did not play too well in that game, and he really didn't play many minutes either. Just getting those initial starter minutes and then kind of fizzling out, similar to a Thon Maker role that we saw in years past, where he would start a lot of games, but really only play like 15 minutes max, which is kind of weird. But again, I think it's going to be Pat or Bryn Forbes, and I honestly think it's probably going to be Pat in game 1, but I don't think Bud will just stick with him the whole series, especially if he's getting exposed. I think he'll switch to a Bryn Forbes or even a PJ Tucker. Now, with Pat, let's say Pat is in the starting lineup, I'm worried about him on the defensive end. If he's got to guard Kyrie Irving, so let me back up. So let's say Pat starts, then how we guard the big 3 has to change a little bit. So if Pat Connaughton's in the starting lineup, this is what I think would happen. Drew would be on James Harden instead of Kyrie Irving. Pat would be on Kyrie, and then Giannis would be on Kevin Durant. And then, still Middleton on Joe Harris and Brook Lopez on Blake Griffin. Pat against Kyrie, boy, I don't love that at all. He is going to get cooked. Like, having PJ in there in place of that, it just makes the defensive unit so much stronger. And that's why I really, really think it would make sense to start PJ Tucker. But man, Pat really scares me if he's starting against the Brooklyn Nets and having to guard Kyrie Irving one-on-one. I mean, especially like a guy like Kyrie, if he makes his first couple shots, he's going to have that confidence throughout the whole game and probably go off for 30 to 40 points in that game. Now, obviously, we don't know if that would happen for sure, but Kyrie, is one of those guys. If he gets hot in the beginning, look out, because he's just going to go off. He is a really, really talented player, and that's not a guy you want to get confident early on in a game, and especially even in the series. So I really, really don't want them to start Pat. I think it would be a mistake. I just don't know what else he provides on the offensive end, really, that's going to help us that much. Like, I've been a Pat supporter all year, and I still am. But in this series, I really think he needs to be neutralized a little bit and still getting some minutes, because he has to, with Dante being out. Like 10 to 15 minutes would be fine for me for Pat at the most. But again, I really don't want him starting. If it's not going to be PJ Tucker, give me Bryn Forbes. I think Bryn Forbes would be able to guard Kyrie Irving better than Pat Connaughton would. I really liked what I've seen from Bryn Forbes in the defensive end in the playoffs and at the end of the regular season. He's moving his feet really well and staying in front of guys and just playing his ass off in general. And I really like the effort from Bryn Forbes. I think that he could do a serviceable job on Kyrie, similar to what Dante could, probably a little worse, but not that much different, to be honest with you. And if they're not going to start PJ, I think Bryn has got to be the guy. Clearly, we know he's going to give you a spark on the offensive end. I mean, he's the human flamethrower now, they're calling him. I absolutely love the nickname, Flamethrower Forbes, again. But, I mean, I just think that he makes way more sense than Pat Connaughton in the starting lineup in this series. Now, I know that a lot of people will say, oh, well, Bryn Forbes is so much better off the bench because he gives that offensive spark and he fits in really well, coming off the bench. And I agree with that. But when you lose a starting shooting guard in Dante, you've got to put yourself in the best position to win these games. And for me, Bryn Forbes is definitely the second best option to PJ Tucker in the starting lineup. And I just think it makes the most sense. So again, if Bryn Forbes starts, then I'm going Drew on James Harden, Bryn Forbes on Kyrie, and Giannis on Kevin Durant. So that just really makes the most sense to me. Again, Kyrie's not a huge guy either, and sometimes Bryn can have a little bit more struggles with taller guys. So I really think that matchup would actually bode decently well for Bryn. Again, he would still get cooked. Kyrie's still going to get his, but I think he's going to make it a lot more difficult on Kyrie than Pat Connaughton is. So again, that's what I'm looking at in the starting five. I really want it to be PJ. If not, give me Bryn Forbes all day, and Pat Connaughton would be my third ranked out of those three for the starting shooting guard position in this series. Now, let's talk a little bit about the rotation here. So we obviously saw in game 4 that Bryn Forbes played a huge role in that game, playing a good amount of minutes and just lighting it up like he did all series long. I mean, gosh, he's just been fantastic for the Bucks. And clearly he needs to get mid 20 minutes per game at the minimum, pushing 30 minutes a game if he's shooting that well, because, I mean, he just is a difference maker for the Bucks in this series. And he was probably the biggest difference maker in the series against the Miami Heat. Who thought Bryn Forbes would have scored 15 points a game against Miami and just really tipped that series? I mean, if it weren't for him, we probably would have lost at least one game, maybe two. He was that impactful. I really think him and Brook Lopez were two of the most valuable players in that series, especially if you're looking at non-big three guys on the Bucks rather than Giannis, Chris, and Drew. Those are two most impactful players in that series for me. And I really think Bryn Forbes can carry that over into round 2 against the Nets. So again, Bryn Forbes needs to be playing a lot of minutes. Even if he's not knocking down shots, he's not afraid to keep taking them. We all know he's got a nice pump fake drive game. So again, expect for Bryn Forbes to really make another impact in the series. And I think he's up for the challenge, and I think he's going to play really, really well. Now, another big topic that we're going to talk about here is, should Jeff Teague get minutes? Now, we saw Jeff Teague get some minutes in game 4 against the Heat. I think it was, somewhere around 10 to 15 minutes a game, or 10 to 15 minutes in that game. And I thought he played decently well. He hit a three. He can run the offense and dribble the ball up the court and get the ball moving a little bit. And I don't think he's the worst defender in the world. And he's still really quick on offense too. Like, he's got a really nice burst when he's driving to the lane. And I think that can, really help create other shots for other guys. If he's driving into the lane, someone's going to have to help off of him, and bam, he can dish it into the corner to a Bryn, a Bobby Portis, PJ Tucker, Middleton, whoever, and knock down a nice open shot. So I really hope to see Jeff Teague play in the series. Again, similar to approach to what I was saying to do in game 4. Give Jeff Teague about 5 minutes, late first quarter, early second, see how he does. If he plays well, give him more opportunity. If he doesn't, maybe just marginalize that a little bit and not play him too much. But I think you got to give Jeff Teague 2 runs in every game in this series, unless he's really getting exposed, which I don't think it could happen, but I don't think it will happen. I like Jeff Teague's game. I think that he can make an impact in the series, and I like the Bucks having a 9-man rotation versus an 8-man rotation. I think it just makes things easier from a rotation flow perspective, like we saw in games 1 through 3 before Dante got hurt. So again, Jeff Teague, another big topic in this series. I think he's going to get some minutes, and I think he's going to take advantage of them and play well. So keep an eye on how Bud uses Jeff Teague throughout the series. That's another big point for me. And another one too for me is just going to see, do the Bucks finally go with that small ball lineup that we've been wanting to see more in the regular season and the playoffs? Now, when I'm talking the small ball lineup, I mean Giannis at the center, and then PJ Tucker at the 4, and then probably like Chris Middleton, Bryn Forbes, and Drew Holiday. That's what I'm looking at in that small ball lineup. That lineup can switch 1 through 5 on defense, and is just going to be a really nice offensive lineup for the Bucks as well. PJ hitting that corner 3, Bryn Forbes running around, hitting tough 3-pointers like he did against the Heat and all regular season long. Chris Middleton, just being a great offensive player in his mid-range game. Drew Holiday running the offense. Giannis being used off of pick and rolls and driving to the lane. I mean, Giannis just dominated the Nets in that 2-game mini series, and all 3 games of the regular season this year, he averaged upper 30s points per game in 3 games against the Nets, which is absolutely absurd. I think it was 39 points per game, which is just wild. I don't think he's going to average quite that, but I could see mid-30s for Giannis in this series. I mean, clearly he's got to be our best player if the Bucks want to win this series, and I think he's up for the challenge, and I think he's going to play extremely well. I mean, who's going to guard him? Blake Griffin? Hell no. DeAndre Jordan, we saw that, and Giannis cooked him for 49 points in game 1 of that 2-game mini series. I mean, Jeff Green is still banged up for them. Now, that's going to be a key thing to keep an eye on as well. He's got like a minor plantar fasciitis in one of his foot. So, again, it's going to be important to see what his status is. He was going to be reevaluated in 10 days from the injury, which is going to be this coming weekend. So I don't expect him to play in game 1. That's an injury that really lingers on. It's hard to overcome unless you really just get the required rest. So even if Jeff Green plays, I don't think he's going to be 100%, but even them having him on the floor is going to help them. Jeff Green was a great player for them all year. He shot really well from 3. He's a pretty decent defender, 6'8" forward. He can't guard Giannis one-on-one, obviously, but, he's a guy you can switch 1 through 4 on defense, and he's the veteran presence on that team. They look at him as a leader in that locker room. So I just think he's been a really good player for them, and he could clearly help them in the series. So if Jeff Green's out for the whole entire series, that definitely gives the Bucks a little bit of an advantage. Having Brooklyn having to go to other guys like Nick Claxton a little bit more, who clearly cannot guard Giannis as well. Now, he's an athletic big, but he's very slender, and Giannis is just going to bulldoze that dude. I mean, they have no one with the size and strength to guard Giannis. DeAndre Jordan is the closest from a size and strength perspective, but he just got absolutely roasted in that 2-game mini series. So, again, it's going to be really important to see how they defend Giannis and how that goes. But again, I think there's so many things in terms of how the Bucks are using their rotation. Do we see that small ball lineup more? I want to get back to that. Now, I think that's going to be, the Nets are going to play small a lot in this series. So I think if Brook Lopez isn't cutting it and is getting cooked on the defensive end, we've got to move to that small ball lineup more with Giannis at the 5 and PJ at the 4. And I really expect them to do that because I think this is the series to do it, and it's going to give us the best chance to beat the Nets. Now, I think defense is going to really be important in the series. Now, I think the Bucks can they can keep up with the Nets from a scoring perspective. We're the number 1 scoring team in the league at 120 points per game in the regular season. The Bucks can clearly score. There's no doubt about that. I think it's going to come down to the Bucks getting stops on the defensive end. If they can do that, I really think they're going to win this series. So again, really keep an eye on how Bud is using his rotations and if he plays more of a small ball lineup with, again, Giannis at the 5, PJ at the 4, or even like Giannis at the 5, Portis at the 4, Tucker at the 3, and then like Middleton and Drew, or the one that I really like I said before, Giannis, PJ, Middleton, Forbes, and Drew Holiday. I think that's going to be our best lineup for this series. So I'm really, really curious to see how Bud approaches this now. So let's get into the kind of overall projection of the series, where I think it's going to go. Now, the Brooklyn Nets, they're not great defensively. We all know that, but they're going to come to play against this Bucks team. Now, I don't think they really tried a whole lot in that series against the Celtics, but they know that they're going to have to play well to beat this Milwaukee Bucks team, or they're going to go home. So I think the Nets are going to bring it on defense. I still don't think they have really great talent on D, but they're going to play much harder and try and get stops because they know that this is a really good Milwaukee Bucks team, and they've got to play really good to beat them. So expect the Nets to play really, really tough on the defensive end. I still don't think that's going to be able to neutralize the Bucks' offensive firepower because, again, we just have so many talented offensive players and the number 1 scoring offense. So it's going to be hard for them to stop our offense with the limited defensive personnel that they have on that team. So, again, keep an eye on how the Brooklyn Nets are playing from a defensive perspective. I think Bruce Brown is going to play a huge role for them in the series. He's like a really, really aggressive, kind of like a Marcus Smart type player, not the same offensive skill set of Marcus Smart, but from a defensive perspective, he's very similar to Marcus Smart, just a tier or 2 below him. But he's played really well for them throughout the whole year. They really like Bruce Brown in that locker room. And I think he's going to play a lot of minutes in the series because he's just a pest. He gets under people's skin. He's really, really active on the rebounding game. So again, and he's a guy who can switch like 1 through 4 even. He's pretty short, but he's a really stout, strong player who is going to get in players' heads and play some really aggressive defense. And that's a kind of guy that the Brooklyn Nets need in this series. So just keep an eye out for Bruce Brown. I think he's going to play a really, really valuable role for them, and just look out to see how he plays in that series. So again, just going down overall projections, Nets not the best defensively, but they're going to give it their all. Bucks have an absolutely elite offense, number 1 scoring in the league. The Bucks defense has been playing as well as it possibly has, especially in that series against the Heat. I mean, the way they defended was just out of this world, something I didn't expect they would do. The Heat averaged less than 100 points per game in that series, which is crazy to think. And the Bucks just really came to play on the defensive end, and I expect that to continue in this series. I think the Bucks are going to be able to get stops at times when they need them. Shots aren't always going to fall for the Nets. I know they have 3 of the 12 best players in the league, all of them elite shooters, but there's going to be times where they're all not falling, and even Joe Harris as well. So I think the Bucks are going to have a hard time stopping them all the time, but when they need to get some stops, I think they'll be able to do that. So again, just kind of projecting the overall series, it's going to be a battle. Game 1 is going to be really important. I think the Bucks take game 1 in the series and fall in game 2, leading it to 1-1 coming into Milwaukee. And at that point, I think the Bucks take care of business at home, win games 3 and 4 to take a 3-1 series lead, putting the Nets on the brink of elimination, which is just crazy to even think about. 4 games into the series, Brooklyn comes home for game 5. I think they take that game to cut it to 3-2. Come into Milwaukee, 3-2. Brooklyn's got some momentum winning that last game. Pressure's on the Bucks to close it out at home. And you know what? I think they're going to do it. Bucks in 6. It's got to happen at some point, right? It hasn't happened since the mid 80s, and that's all we ever hear on Bucks Twitter every year in the playoffs is Bucks in 6, Bucks in 6. It's just got a nice ring to it. So again, I think it's finally going to happen. I'm confident that the Bucks can win this series, and I think they're going to get it done and upset the Brooklyn Nets in 6 games, closing it out in Milwaukee. Gosh, that would just be absolutely electric. I would definitely be at that game, and boy, I cannot wait for it. But again, it's going to be a battle. Game 1 is going to be really important. I don't love that the Bucks have been off for a week, and Brooklyn just played their last game on Tuesday. So, I mean, they only had our game 4 was on Saturday. So, and theirs was Tuesday. So the Bucks have a couple extra days of rest. So it's really not that much of a tipping point, but sometimes those teams can come off a little sluggish having a week plus of rest. So I don't love that for the Bucks, but I just think that they're going to be able to get stops in key moments in this game, and Giannis is going to dominate. I expect Jrue to play really well in the series. Middleton averaged 25 points a game against Brooklyn in that 2-game mini series. I expect Kevin Durant to be matched up on Middleton, which is going to give him problems at times, but I think Middleton's going to be able to take advantage of that defensive matchup at times and still put up plenty of points and really play well for the Bucks, especially late in the game. I'm really trusting Chris Middleton to get it done in the series, and I think he's going to do it. And I think the Bucks take this one in 6. It's going to be a battle. All the games are going to be close. But I'm confident in my team. I've got to pick my team, and I think the Bucks are going to send them home and advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. So that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, going to be just an absolutely box office series, easily the best one in the second round. Could be one of the best series of this whole playoff run in 2021. And boy, I cannot wait for Saturday night. So thanks again, guys, for watching. And I'll be posting videos after each game to give a breakdown. I will be on vacation a week from today, actually a week from yesterday, for a couple days. So I won't be able to get out a post-game video after game 3 and most likely game 4, but I'll try and get something together for you guys just to get my wrap-up of the 2 games in Milwaukee, Bucks Nets. So we'll figure something out there. But again, thanks guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Go Bucks.